Dawn kept its breath. The town of Low Mesa crouched under a sky the color of old tin. Wind hissed along the hitching rails, and the dust smelled like cold iron. I swung down from my horse and listened to the silence that comes before a bell tolls. The night had not finished dying. Morning had not learned my name. My name was Colt Mercer, and trouble already knew it. The street lay empty except for a single lantern outside the saloon. Its glass was fogged with last night's whiskey and a thumbprint of heat. A church shadow leaned across the road like a tired cross. In that shadow, on the far end of town, 3 riders waited. Their coats lifted and fell with the wind, guns low, eyes steady. I could feel their nerves from where I stood. I could feel my own calm thick as river clay. I checked the Colt at my hip without looking. Old habit. The leather felt warm from the ride. The horse snorted and struck at the dirt. I touched his neck. Easy. He settled. The eastern rim lit with a thin blade of copper. Every dawn looks like a promise. This one looked like judgment. The saloon door opened with a soft breath. A woman stepped out, holding a folded shawl to her chest. She had the night in her hair and desert dawn in her eyes. Annabelle Reed. I did not know her name yet. I only knew the hush that fell across my bones when she looked at me. Calm slipped over me like a blanket warmed by fire. She said nothing. She did not need to. The way her fingers tightened on the shawl told me she had seen mornings like this. The way she stood straight told me she had survived them. The glass behind her carried the smell of coffee and smoke and the last song of a piano that had given up just before sunrise. Across the street, the 3 riders nudged their mounts forward. Their leader had a white scar at the corner of his mouth. Sheriff Brandt had told them to find me, or so the rumor rode. Maybe they rode for another man. Men like me collect the dust of other men's stories. It clings and it weighs, and it looks the same in every county. I stepped into the street. Gravel clicked beneath my boots. The air chilled my lungs. Birds watched from the eaves, small and patient. My heart walked steady. Not fast, not slow, steady. The leader drew first, because men who talk too much often move too soon. His hand flashed. My gun whispered. The shot struck the ground between us. Purposeful. A warning. He halted, surprised by mercy. His friends cut glances sideways, unsure of the price of breath. I spoke. My voice felt like a dry creek bed carved by years, still holding a little water if you knew where to cup your hands. I told them to turn around. The leader grinned his scar and spat. He called me a liar. People like me do not give warnings. They cache them. Something shifted then. Not in the street, in me. A memory rose of the last town and the last dawn and the last woman who watched a man fall and could not sleep right for weeks. I had carried that silence for miles. It tasted like cold ashes. I did not want to feed anyone that taste again. The leader lifted his gun again. My second shot cracked the brim from his hat. It cartwheeled into the dust and lay like a dead crow. He blinked. His hand trembled. Behind me the saloon door creaked, and a breath that was not my own snared inside a throat that was not mine. But then she whispered, and the sound was barely more than a touch on the wind. Please. Not today. The word cut through the dust like water, not a command. A prayer offered to no altar, but the space between two hearts. My eyes met hers for a beat. She did not flinch. She held my gaze like a rope holds a man back from the cliff. I lowered my gun first. The riders did not expect that. Mercy carries a weight harder to lift than iron. They felt it. They shifted in their saddles as if something invisible had turned heavy in the air. The leader picked up his hat. He looked from me to the woman on the porch. He muttered something I could not hear. Then he turned his horse. The others followed, resentful and relieved. The street exhaled. Birds returned to their tiny lives. A dog trotted from behind a barrel and sniffed at a piece of leather as if war and peace smelled the same. The sun inched above the corrugated roofs and smeared gold across the saloon windows. I stood there for a moment, letting the shake move through me. It was not fear. It was the aftertaste of choosing a path and letting the other die. Every man loses a version of himself each time he spares a life. I had learned that long ago. Today I chose to misplace the one who shoots first. I did not know if I would find him again when evening came. The woman stepped down from the porch. Close now, I saw the faint bruise of loneliness under her eyes. Not from a hand, from years, from staying while others rode. She reached out as if to touch my sleeve, thought better of it, and folded her hand back into the shawl. "Coffee is warm inside," she said. Her voice carried a soft grit, river stones and hearth smoke. She turned without waiting for my answer. I followed her into the dim. The saloon smelled of cedar shavings and old hymns that had forgotten their churches. A small fire murmured in the stove. The piano sat with its keys uncovered, like teeth in a smile that had outlived the joke. She poured coffee into a tin mug and set it before me. Her hands were steady, her mouth softened at the corner, neither a smile nor a frown. A waiting place. I told her my name. Colt Mercer. She said hers like a string pulled tighter and then released. Annabelle Reed. She kept my eyes while she said it, as if names were doors, and she wanted to be sure I had walked through the right one. We drank in the quiet. The first swallow lined my ribs with heat. The second brought back the horse's breath, the morning's blade, the way the riders had turned. Annabelle watched me with a look I had seen on desert women after a storm, relief chased by worry, because clouds always return. "What brings you to Low Mesa, Mr. Mercer? Folks rarely pass for the view." I told her I was headed toward Canyon Ridge, work with a cattle drive if the foreman still remembered me. She nodded, as if she had been to every place I named, even the ones that only exist in a man's intentions. Her fingers found the edge of the counter and tapped once. A small sound. Honest. "There is a storm due tonight," she said. "The roof holds if the wind behaves. If it does not, we move the tables and set bowls to catch the leak. It has a rhythm, that storm water, like a slow song when the piano sleeps." She looked toward the window where sun pooled like honey. Her voice lowered. "I am glad you did not take blood with your sunrise." Words like that can split a man open. They land where the bones keep their stories. I wanted to ask who had bled here before me. I wanted to ask who had left and who had stayed, and what kind of dawn had shaped the bruise beneath her eyes. Questions rose and circled, but I held them. Some truths need a longer trail. I finished the coffee and set the mug down. The room felt warmer. The fire breathed like a patient animal. Her presence made the edges of the world less sharp. The dust outside felt less like judgment and more like the soft blanket it sometimes is when a man lies back and watches stars repair the sky. She touched the mug, turning it slightly, as if aligning it with some compass only she could read. Her fingers brushed mine. Heat slid across my knuckles. Neither of us moved away. The morning had begun with guns in the street. It settled now into something quiet and strange. Safe, yet not dull. Open, yet not careless. Desire stood at the doorway and took off its hat, patient as a gentleman. Healing pulled up a chair by the stove. They looked at each other and agreed to share the table. Outside, a bell rang once from the church, and a wagon rolled past with a dry rumble. Life resumed its old habits. Inside, something new had stepped in and closed the door against the wind. If this warmth has eased a corner of your heart, stay near. The day still has miles to cross, and the night will carry its own kind of light. By mid-morning, the town woke like a horse rising slow after a long night. Doors opened. Brooms scratched at stoops. The stove in the saloon breathed steady. I helped Annabelle shift a table to catch a thin leak already counting drops in a tin bowl. She watched the ceiling and smiled at the sound, said it was a friendly rhythm, said storms tell the truth about roofs and people. A rider clattered in from the south. He wore the dust of hard news. He tossed his reins to a rail, walked inside, and found his thirst at once. His eyes found me next. He measured my height, my boots, the holster that had not cooled yet from dawn. He said nothing. I could feel a rumor settling into the room like another chair at the table. Annabelle kept her voice quiet. Travelers fill up and move on by noon. If you are heading for Canyon Ridge, the stage leaves near sundown, but you could wait for morning. Roads flood when the first rain comes. She did not say stay. She said it without saying it. I set a coin on the bar and asked for water. My throat was not dry. I wanted the pause. She poured from a clay jug and handed me a glass that had seen 1,000 hands. Our fingers touched again. A clean spark slid through my skin and went still somewhere behind my ribs. I looked at her mouth and looked away. It felt like looking into a fire you want to stand beside but not yet feed. The piano man arrived near noon. He wore a hat too big and pride too small. He set down a case and pulled a cord that creaked like a door. A broken note followed. He cursed, lifted the lid, and found a wedge of card to quiet the buzz. The next chord sat straight. He began a slow hymn a traveller might hum when night stretches long. It braided the room into one strand. A ranch hand sighed. A girl by the window closed her eyes and leaned her head against the glass as if it were a shoulder. The swinging doors opened again. Sheriff Brant walked in with the easy weight of a man used to rooms watching him breathe. He had the voice of a teacher and the hands of a farmer. I had seen both kinds pull men from the mud and put them right back in. He glanced at me once. Not long. He ordered stew. He ate it standing. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and turned. He said Mr. Mercer like he had read the name off a paper. I said, Sheriff. He studied my holster the way a preacher studies a pause. "Tell me why 3 riders left our town at dawn with their hats low and their mouths closed." I told him they had run out of one kind of courage and found another. He did not smile. "You, a hired gun, or a man who prefers to be asked the wrong question twice." His voice had a calm edge. He was used to men meeting it and sliding back. I met it and stood. I told him I was passing through. I told him I would leave when the road was fit. I told him there was no blood for him to count with his noon bread. He took that in like a book he might read later. Annabelle spoke then. She said Mr. Mercer kept the sun clean this morning. She said the street could have learned a darker lesson. Her eyes did not move from the sheriff while she said it. A small rebellion with no flag, just a steady gaze and a woman's weathered faith. Brant weighed her words and set them aside like a tool he did not need yet. He stepped closer to me. The room gathered for it without standing. Even the piano leaned in. "There is a man named Sloane Cutter," he said. "He runs his debts with a smile and pays them with other men's pockets. He has been leaning on our freighters. 3 nights back, he leaned on a widow who runs a feed shed by the river. He will be back. The kind of men who ride with him are not the kind who let a quiet morning change their habits." I listened and saw the shape of the sheriff's thought. He wanted a gun he did not have to pay. He wanted a man who could pull iron with no question. He wanted me to be that man until the mud dried and the train whistled. His eyes said he would not call it a request. I told him I was not his, not the town's, not Sloane's, not even the distance's. I belonged to a simple plan that began with Canyon Ridge and ended somewhere beyond it, where a man could work until sleep and forget old names. He nodded. Some men take pride in hearing no. He was not one of them. He set the bowl on the bar hard enough to rattle the spoons. He told me to keep my hands visible and my mouth closed around peace. He told Annabelle to keep the doors latched before dusk. Then he left his silent law behind and walked out into light that had thickened to yellow. The room let out its breath. The piano stumbled and found its step again. Annabelle was not looking at the door. She was looking at me like the sound of water at night. Curious, careful, near. I told her I had no wish to take up the sheriff's quarrels. She said men never intend to. They wake and find themselves standing where someone needed them to be. She said it without pressure. Just a true line laid across a table. A shadow paused at the window. A boy with a scar that had not yet learned to be hard peered in and ran. I walked to the glass and watched dust push along the street like a slow river. A cloud banked over the southern buttes. The skin on my forearms lifted. The storm had turned its face toward us, but then she whispered behind me, "The widow by the river is my sister." I turned. The room shortened to the space between us. The tin bowl in the corner ticked slow with a new leak. Her hands stayed steady on the bar. Her voice did not ask. It told the air to hold something it could not see. She said the widow lost a child 2 winters ago. She said men like Sloane favored that kind of door. They knock with kindness. They enter with teeth. She said her sister would lock the shed at dusk and pray the river would speak up if trouble came. The river had been quiet all spring. I wanted to gather every question and toss them to the floor. Instead, I asked the one that mattered. How far to the river? 6 miles if the road behaves. 3 if you take the wash and trust your horse. trust. She had said it as if it belonged to me. I looked out again. The cloud had grown a shoulder and a spine. Along the ridge a line of ravens rose and fell like a pulse. I felt the choice walk into the room and sit across from me. It set its hat on the table. It folded its hands. It waited for my breath. I told her to pack bread and a jar. I told her to give me the name of the turn that leaves the road and falls toward the river. I told her I would ride and look. I said nothing about coming back, saying it would make it soft, and I needed the edge. She moved quick but not frantic. She wrapped half a loaf in clean cloth. She added jerky and a tin of coffee and a small knife that looked like a secret every woman kept within reach. She slid them into a saddlebag and placed it on the counter. Her fingers brushed the leather, then stopped. She did not want to touch my hand, because if she did, she might tell me more than I could carry. I almost told her to let the sheriff do his job. I almost told her Dusk could pass without a story. I did not tell her any of it. I took the bag. I thanked her. The word felt too small and too tender. She accepted it like a note in a hymn. The street waited hot and bright. My horse stamped, eager for the work. I swung up and felt the day lift behind me. Annabelle stood in the doorway with light along her shoulder. She was not a prayer. She was the part of a prayer that keeps a man honest. If this story has warmed a quiet corner of you, stay close. The road to the river is long, and the storm has a voice that carries farther than fear. The trail south ran narrow, a thin scar between sagebrush and stone. The air thickened, heavy with the warning of rain. Clouds dragged their bellies low across the desert ridge, and thunder began to speak like a man not yet ready to fight, but close. I rode slow, listening. Every sound felt sharper before a storm. The wind had a taste, metal and memory. My horse, Flint, tossed his head once, uneasy. I let him move his own pace. The wash Annabelle mentioned ran along the right, dry for now, cracked with old floods, carved deep enough to hide a secret or a man. I followed it, letting instinct do the steering. The land smelled of creosote and old bones. Halfway down the wash I saw the first sign. A set of tracks, 2 riders, maybe 3, fresher than morning coffee. The prints cut deep, careless, not cattlemen, not travellers. Predators seldom hide their steps when they think the valley belongs to them. Lightning flared far off. I counted the heartbeats before thunder found me. 4. The storm was moving quick. I adjusted the rifle in its sling, loosened the strap on my holster. Then I rode. The widow's shed came into view just as the rain began its low drumming. It stood small by the bend of the river, one window glowing faint, one horse tied near a cottonwood, a wagon half sunk in mud. Smoke drifted from a crooked chimney. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe I'd come too early, that danger had not arrived. But then Flint's ears pricked, and I heard it. A muffled shout from inside, a woman's voice, then a man's laughter that carried like gravel. I dismounted without thought. The air around me turned to silver threads of rain. I crept toward the door, boots silent on wet earth. Through the crack of the shutter, I saw 2 men, one tall, one heavy, and a woman near the stove, her back to them, shoulders stiff. One man held a pistol low, lazy. The other searched a chest. Sloan Cutter wasn't among them, but these were his kind. I pushed the door open slow. The hinges sighed. The tall one turned first. His smile was wrong for the room. He started to raise his gun. Mine was already steady. "Let it drop," I said. He didn't. So I fired. The sound cracked through the storm. He folded fast, more surprise than pain on his face. The heavy one froze, then lunged. The second shot tore the air, but missed. And he hit me like a bull. We crashed against the table. Dishes flew. The woman screamed once, sharp, then gone silent. I hit the floor hard, shoulder burning, mud and blood mixing under my hand. The man came again, knife drawn. Something old and mean inside me woke up then. I caught his wrist, slammed it against the stove. The blade dropped. I used the moment, pushed, twisted. His breath left him in a sound that wasn't quite human. He fell. The room went still except for the hiss of rain on fire. The widow, Sarah Reed, Annabelle's sister, stared at me with eyes wide and wild. She had a bruise on her arm, a streak of blood across her cheek that wasn't hers. I took off my hat. The storm filled the silence. "It's done," I said. She trembled once, then steadied. "Who are you?" "A friend of your sister's." The words came soft, and I didn't know if they were true yet. She looked at the men on the floor, and then at me. "You'll bring more of them." Sloane never forgets his debt. I told her she should pack. She said she wouldn't leave the place her boy was buried. Her voice cracked on the last word, but held its shape. I had nothing to answer that kind of strength. Outside, rain thickened to a wall. I stepped out to check the horizon. Hoofbeats carried through the wash, slow, deliberate. 2 riders at least, maybe 3. "Inside," I said, and she obeyed. I blew out the lantern, shut the door, and moved to the window. Lightning painted the wash white for an instant, and in that flash I saw them, riders moving low, hoods up, rifles resting easy. I counted their rhythm, their distance, and something cold slid through my chest. If they'd followed the ones I'd shot, they'd reach us before dark. The storm would hide the sound, but not the smell of gunpowder. I turned back. Sarah had taken the pistol from the fallen man and held it steady, though her hands shook. She looked small against the storm, but not weak. "I can fight," she said. "I believe you," I told her. "But if this turns loud, stay low. When I say ride, you ride." She nodded. Her breath trembled once. I felt the echo in my own lungs. I stepped outside again. The storm wrapped around me like a wet hide. Wind pulled at my coat. I led Flint to the side of the shed, whispered calm into his ear. He stood quiet, loyal as an oath. Through the rain, I saw the riders break from the wash. 3 shapes now. One called out. His voice rolled through the thunder, asking for Sloane's boys. No answer came. They dismounted. I drew my gun, waited. The first man reached the door. I saw his hand touch the latch, felt the air tighten. Then I fired once into the ground by his boot. He jumped back, swore, looked around for the ghost that had spoken. Lightning flashed again, and for a heartbeat his eyes found mine. That heartbeat was long enough. My second shot took his hat clean off. The message was simple: keep your life. The rain carried it for me. They hesitated, argued. One shouted something I couldn't hear, and then, like men who knew the worth of breathing, they turned. When their shapes melted into the grey, I stayed still a long time, waiting for deceit. Only the rain answered. I holstered my gun and stepped inside. Sarah stood near the door, eyes searching me. "They gone?" "For now." She exhaled, a sound of exhaustion more than relief. Then she said, "You'll draw them back, you know. Men like that circle until something bleeds." I told her I'd leave before dawn. She shook her head. "If you leave, they'll come for Annabelle next. Cutter don't forget who stands in his way." Her words hit like a thrown stone. I felt the truth in them. Annabelle's face flashed in memory, eyes like a storm that had learned how to wait. Outside, thunder moved north, slow and thoughtful. Inside, the fire coughed and caught again. Sarah poured whiskey into a cup and pushed it toward me. "For courage," she said. I took it. It burned down clean, carved the chill out of my chest. The storm softened to steady rain. She sat, shoulders lowering. For the first time, silence didn't feel dangerous. But under that calm, something restless began to stir. The kind of knowing that says a fight postponed only grows sharper in the dark. If this storm has reached you too, stay near. Night will bring its reckoning, and somewhere beneath the rain, a promise waits to be kept. The storm didn't end that night. It stretched into dawn, a slow grey tide washing over the desert. I stayed near the widow's shed until the clouds began to thin, until the smell of wet cedar replaced the sharp bite of lightning. The men I had dropped lay under the cottonwood now, covered with what earth I could lift. Sarah said a prayer that sounded more like a lullaby. When I rode back toward Low Mesa, the land had changed color, darker, richer, like the storm had painted over the dust. The river behind me murmured low, grateful to be full again. I left before Sarah could thank me. Some words are easier carried unsaid. The road cut through open country. Clouds hung torn and restless. Every mile I felt the weight of what waited in town. The sheriff's questions, the eyes of strangers, Annabelle's silence. The wind shifted behind me, bringing the smell of smoke. I turned in the saddle and saw a faint column rising where the shed had stood. Fire. It crawled quick through wet grass, mean and hungry, Sloane Cutter's way of signing his threats. I pressed my heels to Flint's sides and rode hard. Low Mesa came into view before noon. The saloon's roof glistened from the rain, and smoke curled from its chimney like a slow exhale. Annabelle was outside, sweeping the steps, hair damp and shining. She looked up when she heard me. The broom stopped. Her face told me she already knew. I dismounted. My boots hit the mud soft. "They burned it," I said. She didn't ask who. "Is she alive?" "She will be," I said. "For now." Her eyes closed, just once, like a door trying to hold back wind. "Then it begins," she said. "Cutter will come for both of you now." The street behind us was quiet. 2 men sat on a wagon, pretending not to listen. The sheriff stood near the jailhouse porch, arms crossed, watching. He already looked tired of what hadn't yet happened. Annabelle stepped closer. "You could still leave before dusk." "And leave him to come knocking here?" I asked. She looked away. The broom handle twisted in her hands. "He already has." The air between us thinned. I could almost hear her heart moving behind her ribs. She told me Cutter's men had ridden through town once before, took whiskey without paying, broke a window when she asked them to stop. The sheriff had looked the other way. Low Mesa fears him, she said. But fear turns into favor when enough time passes. I watched her speak and realized something. She wasn't just angry. She was tired of surviving, tired of rebuilding after men like Sloane decided to play God with fire and gunpowder. I told her I would ride east by sundown, find Cutter's camp before he found the town. Her gaze met mine, steady as the rain. You can't take them alone. I'm not looking to take them, I said, just to end it before it reaches you again. She shook her head. It's already reached me. Her voice broke just enough to let the truth slip through. I didn't touch her, but I wanted to. Sometimes closeness feels like the only honest language left. Instead, I walked past her, tied Flint to the rail, and stepped inside the saloon. The place smelled of soap and pine now. Tables were wiped, floor swept, fire alive in the stove. She kept order like a prayer. The piano man nodded from his corner. I dropped my hat on the counter. "Coffee," I said. Annabelle poured it without speaking. The steam rose between us like a veil. When I took the cup, our fingers brushed again. Same spark, same quiet pulse that ran deeper than sense. She didn't pull back this time. "Where will you find him?" she asked. "By the burned house," I said. "Men like Cutter don't leave their work unfinished." She nodded, then looked down at my hand on the cup. A scar crossed the skin near my thumb, thin and pale. She traced it with her eyes, not her touch. "What did that cost you?" "Too much sleep," I said. Her mouth curved, sad and knowing. "They all do." Outside, thunder muttered again, distant but waiting. I finished the coffee and stood. "Tell the sheriff to keep the doors barred tonight." "He won't listen," she said. "He thinks standing still is safer than standing up." "Then stay close to light," I said. She reached behind the bar and handed me a small oil lamp wrapped in cloth. "Take it," she said. "In case the night forgets where you are." I wanted to refuse, but something about her tone made it impossible. The lamp was warm in my hand, still holding the touch of her skin. I left before my thoughts could turn soft. The wind followed me out of town, carrying the scent of rain and something sweet from the saloon's kitchen. The world dimmed to amber and ash. By the time I reached the ridge, dusk was waiting, patient as a hunter. Smoke still rose from where the shed had burned. The fire hadn't spread far. The sky glowed faint blue over the blackened ruin. I tied Flint under a mesquite and climbed the hill. From there I saw them. 4 riders this time, camped in the shallow basin. A lantern burned low between them. Cutter sat apart, hat pulled low, the rain turning silver on his coat. He looked calm, like a man who could wait for the world to surrender. I watched in silence until his head lifted. He turned, slow, toward the ridge. I froze, half shadow, half hope. He couldn't see me from that far. But some men don't need eyes to feel the weight of being watched. The wind shifted. His voice drifted faint through the rain. "Tell Mercer the sun won't rise for him twice." He was speaking to the dark, but I felt it land on me all the same. I eased back from the ridge and mounted Flint. The oil lamp Annabelle had given me hung from the saddle, faint glow swinging like a heartbeat. I rode north, away from Cutter's fire, the storm closing in behind. The desert stretched wide, endless, beautiful in its loneliness. Somewhere behind me, a man plotted vengeance. Somewhere ahead, a woman waited without saying she would. And between those two truths, I rode. A soul caught between danger and desire, between the sharp edge of violence and the softer weight of longing. If this part of the story has found a quiet echo in your chest, stay close. The night isn't done speaking, and the dawn will come with a different kind of fire. The night settled deep over the plains, thick with the smell of rain and smoke. Flint's hooves pressed quiet prints into the soaked ground as I rode north, letting the storm fade behind me. Every few minutes, lightning showed me the road ahead, silver veins cutting through the dark. The oil lamp from Annabelle swung low from my saddle horn, its flame holding steady in its glass, stubborn against the wind. I rode until the first chill of dawn brushed the back of my neck. The desert was clean now, washed of dust and sin. I stopped by a dry creek bed and made camp under a bluff. Small fire hidden from the road. The sky lightened slow. Somewhere a hawk screamed, a sound sharp enough to split memory. I thought of Cutter's words, carried through rain and thunder like a curse. Tell Mercer the sun won't rise for him twice. I'd heard threats before, most faded like smoke. This one stayed. Maybe because it wasn't just about me, it was about her. Annabelle's face came with the memory of her voice, quiet, strong, carrying the warmth of firelight. She'd looked at me like she saw the man I might have been before the gun. And that's a dangerous kind of mercy. It makes you remember you still have something worth losing. I couldn't sleep. The coffee in my blood and the ghost of her touch kept me restless. Around mid-morning, I saw dust lifting far off, a small shape moving fast down the ridge road. I waited until it came clear. A single rider, light frame, moving with purpose. Annabelle. I cursed under my breath and stood. She reined in hard, dismounted before Flint even lifted his head, and faced me with the kind of fire that doesn't need a gun to be dangerous. Her dress was travel-stained, hair loose from the wind. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "I couldn't stay," she answered. "Cutter's men passed through before sunrise. They asked for you by name." Her breath came fast, half from fear, half from anger. She dropped her bag to the ground. "If they find you, they'll burn the whole town after. I told you to stay inside." She stepped closer, eyes fierce. "And I told you Low Mesa has stopped listening to orders. I came because someone should stand beside you when it starts." There was a silence then, filled with wind and heartbeat. I wanted to tell her to go home, to safety. But safety doesn't live where hearts do. She'd already chosen her place in this story. I handed her the lamp she'd given me. "You forgot something." Her mouth softened, just a little. "No," she said. "I meant for it to find you in the dark." We stayed quiet for a while. The fire popped between us, low and steady. The sun began to break through the thinning clouds, laying gold on her hair. In that light, she looked both fragile and fearless, like something the desert couldn't own. "Tell me about him," I said. "Cutter." She sat on a rock near the fire, hands wrapped around a tin cup. "He came to Low Mesa 3 years ago, said he wanted to buy cattle roots. The sheriff backed him. For a while it seemed decent. Then the missing started. Men vanishing from drives, wagons found stripped. When folks talked, he paid them to forget. When they wouldn't, they stopped breathing." Her voice lowered. "My father was one of them." The words hit like dry thunder. I waited for her to look up, but she didn't. The firelight flickered over her knuckles, tight and pale. "He died the same night I swore I'd never beg another man for mercy," she said, "until you walked into that street yesterday morning." The air thickened between us, heavy with things neither of us wanted to name. I watched the horizon turn blue. "You don't owe me anything," I said. She shook her head. "It's not about owing. It's about finishing what started long before you came." The wind shifted. I heard horses far off, faint, rhythmic. Cutters' scouts, maybe. I stood, scanned the ridge. Dust curled in thin columns where the trail bent east. They were closer than I'd hoped. "We ride," I said. She didn't argue. Within a minute she was in the saddle, skirts tied back, hair whipped by the wind. I led us through the wash, following a dry trail that hugged the rock face. The sound of pursuit faded, but only a little. Cutter's men were moving like wolves, patient, sure. By noon, we reached a narrow canyon cut by rain. The walls rose high, carved smooth and silent. I dismounted and led Flint deeper in, searching for cover. The air smelled of stone and thyme. Annabelle followed close. We found a hollow near the back, dry and hidden. I tied the horses and checked the rifle. She sank to the ground, breathing hard but steady. Sweat glistened along her neck. She looked up at me, and for the first time that day, the fear in her eyes wasn't for herself. "You've done this before," she said. "Too many times," I answered. "And every time you lived?" I smiled without humor. "So far." She leaned her head against the rock, closing her eyes. "You sound like a man who stopped expecting tomorrow." "Tomorrow's a kind liar," I said, "but sometimes she keeps her word." Silence stretched, soft and full. The canyon air was cool, the firelight of morning fading into calm. She reached out, fingers brushing the sleeve of my coat. I didn't move. Her hand stayed there, light but sure. "You don't have to face him alone," she said. "Maybe healing doesn't come from killing the past, but standing in front of it with someone who won't run." Her words found a place inside me that had been empty too long. The part that once believed peace was something earned, not stolen. I covered her hand with mine. For a breath, the world outside, the storm, the riders, the desert, went silent. It was just warmth, shared in a place where everything else had turned cold. When she opened her eyes, I saw the fire of dawn reflected there. "When this ends," she whispered, "whatever way it ends, don't ride off before the dust settles." "I'll try," I said. She smiled, faint and sad. "You won't, but I'll hope anyway." The sound of hoofbeats echoed faint through the canyon mouth, pulling us back. I stood, checked my gun, the calm settling over me like a coat I'd worn too often. The fight was coming, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't walking into it hollow. I had something worth standing for. Someone. If this fire has warmed you through the storm, stay close. Night's still waiting to test what love and courage are made of. The canyon didn't hold quiet for long. By sundown, the air had thickened again. Dry, electric, restless. Every sound bounced off the walls, magnified and uncertain. The wind carried grit sharp as glass. Somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder rolled like hooves. We had a small fire hidden behind rocks, no smoke, just a faint pulse of warmth. Annabelle sat close, eyes on the flames. She looked smaller there, wrapped in shadow and glow. The heat brushed her cheeks pink. I could see the weight in her shoulders. Not fear exactly, but the kind of ache that comes when you've decided to face what could break you. I was cleaning my revolver, counting the rounds by touch. 6 left. The rifle had 4. It would have to be enough. "They'll come soon," I said. She didn't ask how I knew. Some things a man can smell before they arrive. She only said, "And if they don't?" "Then the night ends quiet," I said. "And that's its own kind of miracle." Her gaze lifted from the fire to me. "Do you ever hope for miracles, Colt?" I looked at her too long before answering. "I used to. Then I learned they always cost something." "Maybe that's what makes them real." Her voice was soft, steady. The wind caught her hair and played with it like smoke. I felt something shift deep inside me, a longing older than fear, gentler than lust, the kind of feeling that makes a man remember the things he swore he'd buried. The first shot came from the ridge. A spark flared off the rock near my boot. We both dropped low. Flint neighed, spooked by the echo. The next shot ricocheted higher. They were testing distance. I put out the fire with my boot, grabbed the rifle, and moved toward the canyon mouth. "Stay down," I said. Annabelle crawled behind the rocks, silent and sure. I could feel her watching. A shadow crossed the ridge. 1 rider, then 2. Cutter's men had found the trail. They moved slow, cautious. The stormlight behind them turned their shapes into silhouettes, ghostly and mean. I waited. Let them think they had the advantage. When the first one reached the narrow bend, I fired. The shot cracked the night open. He fell before he could finish his curse. The second man ducked and returned fire. Stone chips rained down. The air smelled of powder and rain. Annabelle's voice came behind me, low, calm. "More to the left. 2. I nodded, swung the rifle, fired again. 1 scream, then silence. The canyon echoed with thunder and heartbeats. I could feel mine pounding like a hammer against the dark. Then came Cutter's voice, low and cold, carried on the wind. "You should have kept riding, Mercer." I couldn't see him yet, but I knew he was there. He always watched before he struck. I shouted back, "You should have learned to quit while men still feared you." He laughed. "Fear's just another word for faith, boy." His men moved quick after that. 3 from the left, 1 circling high. I caught 2 before they reached cover, but the others got close enough for the fight to turn raw. Bullets chipped the canyon wall inches from my head. Annabelle stayed hidden, reloading the revolver I'd left beside her. When my rifle clicked empty, she tossed it clean, sure as a gunsmith's hand. I caught it, turned, fired. The last man dropped before his shot found me. The echo faded. The canyon filled with the sound of rain beginning again. Slow, patient. I waited for Cutter's move. Nothing came, just wind and water dripping from stone. Then a voice, closer, softer. "Colt." Annabelle stood, shaking but alive. Her hair clung damp against her neck. The lamp she'd brought glowed faint in her hand. "Is it over?" "Not yet," I said, because there he was, Sloane Cutter, stepping from the shadow like sin in human shape. His hat gone, face streaked with rain and grit. 1 good eye, 1 blind, both mean. "Always a pleasure to meet the man folks whisper about," he said. "You've made quite the mess." I raised the gun. "You brought it," he grinned. I only finish what others start. The flash came fast, his gun barking once. Pain seared my shoulder, hot and deep. I dropped to one knee, forced breath through the fire. He advanced, steady, confident. "Every outlaw learns the same lesson," he said. "Mercy kills slower than lead." I looked past him, toward Annabelle. She held the lamp higher, its flame trembling. Cutter's eyes flicked toward it, just for a second, but long enough. I drew and fired from the ground. The shot hit true. Cutter stumbled, the look on his face half shock, half disbelief. He fell backward into the mud, the rain putting out the last smoke from his gun. The night went quiet again. Only the drip of rain. Only the breath between us. Annabelle ran to me, kneeling beside where I'd fallen. Her hands pressed hard against my wound. Warmth met warmth, and the world tilted softer. "Stay still," she said. "You're bleeding too much." "I've done worse," I murmured, "not with someone watching." Her words came like a whisper meant for the soul. I looked at her, rain on her lashes, her face streaked with dirt and light. And the lamp's glow touched her hair, made her look half real, half memory. The pain dulled. The air around us eased. She leaned close, breath warm against my cheek. The distance between fear and longing vanished like smoke. Her lips brushed mine, just once, light as mercy. The world stopped moving. Somewhere beyond us, thunder rolled again, not in anger, but in release. The storm had broken. I closed my eyes and let her hold the weight I'd carried too long. If this firelight has found its way to your heart, stay close. The rain has stopped, but the dawn still owes us one last reckoning. Morning came quiet, pale and unsure of itself. The storm had washed the canyon clean, leaving the air sharp with the smell of wet sage and smoke. A soft light crawled down the rock walls, touching everything it could reach. The stones, the bodies, the lamp still glowing faint beside the ashes of our fire. Annabelle was awake before I opened my eyes. She sat near me, hair damp, hands stained with dried blood. Mine. She'd torn a piece of her dress for a bandage, wrapped my shoulder tight. The wound burned, but the bleeding had stopped. "How long was I out?" I asked. "Most of the night," she said. "You kept talking in your sleep, about horses, about rain." I tried to smile, but it came out like a wince. "Sounds about right." She poured a little water into my palm. It was cool, clean from the runoff. I drank slow, the world sliding back into focus. The ridge above us still held mist, soft and thin. Flint grazed nearby, patient and loyal. Cutter lay a few yards away, under a blanket of rock and shadow. We hadn't buried him yet. The desert would do that in time. Annabelle followed my gaze. "He's gone," she said. "You can rest." "I don't rest easy," I said. "Not in places that remember blood." She didn't answer. Instead, she stood and stepped into the sunlight, just breaking through the canyon rim. Her dress caught the gold. For a moment, she looked like she didn't belong to this land. Something gentler, brighter, made of mercy instead of dust. I watched her in silence. Sometimes words feel too heavy for what a moment already says. When she turned back, there was something new in her eyes. Not fear, not even sorrow. Something like release. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" I pushed myself up slow. "We ride back. Sheriff'll want proof it's done. And when that's finished—" I paused. The question cut deeper than the wound. "Then I keep riding." She looked down at her hands. "You always do." Her tone wasn't bitter, but I felt the edge of truth in it, the kind that hurts because it's spoken soft. We spent the morning gathering what was left of the camp, a few shells, a broken saddle strap, the last of her bread. She moved careful, quiet, like a woman trying to put distance between her soul and the violence she'd witnessed. Before we left, she knelt by the rock that covered Cutter's face and whispered something I couldn't hear. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe just a goodbye. We rode out at noon, the canyon behind us shimmering with heat. The land stretched open, wide, clean, unclaimed. Every mile felt like a question neither of us knew how to answer. By dusk, we reached the outskirts of Low Mesa. Smoke rose thin from chimneys. The world had gone back to pretending peace. The sheriff was waiting by the rail outside the jail. His face gave nothing away. "You're a hard man to keep alive," he said. "I get that a lot." He looked past me to Annabelle, then to the blood on my sleeve. "Cutter?" "Gone." He nodded once. "You'll have ghosts following you for that." "Wouldn't be the first time." He left it there. No praise, no thanks. Just turned and walked back inside, leaving the door half open, like a man afraid of his own conscience. Annabelle and I stood in the street as the sun slid low. The light caught on her hair, fire and gold. Townsfolk watched from their porches, but said nothing. Silence, in places like this, is the only kind of respect left. I started to mount up, but her voice stopped me. "You could stay," she said. I looked at her, at the way she held herself, strong, proud, but with that trace of loneliness that still clung like dust. "You know I can't." "You could," she said, "if you wanted to." The words hung there. The desert didn't move. Even the wind seemed to wait. I dismounted again, closed the space between us. "You don't need saving, Annabelle. Not anymore." She met my eyes. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean I don't want someone to stay." Her voice trembled then, just enough to break something in me I'd spent years keeping whole. I reached up, brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "You'd hate me if I did," I said. "Men like me bring storms, not shelter." She smiled, soft, sad. "Maybe I've lived with storms long enough to know when they finally mean rain." Her hand touched mine, slow, certain. The world around us blurred. Saloon lights flickering, church bell echoing, dust swirling gold in the dying sun. I leaned down before sense could interfere. Her breath met mine halfway. The kiss wasn't wild or desperate. It was quiet, steady, the kind of kiss that says, "I see you," instead of "I need you." When it ended, she didn't let go right away. "Don't disappear into the dark," she said. "Not this time." "I'll ride east," I said. "Maybe I'll find work in Canyon Ridge. Maybe I'll find peace. Maybe you'll find your way back." I nodded once. Maybe. The church bell tolled again, long and low. I turned, mounted Flint, and looked back only once. She stood in the middle of the street, hands folded at her waist, watching like she was memorizing the horizon. The wind caught her shawl, lifted it around her shoulders like wings. The sun slipped behind the ridge. If this moment has stirred a quiet ache inside you, stay near. The dusk still hums with what the heart dares to keep, and the night somewhere is still waiting to see if love will ride back home. Night returned with the scent of dust and memory. I camped a few miles east of Low Mesa, where the desert rolled gentle toward the ridge. Flint grazed near the creek, ears twitching with every sound. The stars hung clear and close, as if the storm had washed the sky itself clean. I sat by a small fire, my shoulder stiff beneath the bandage Annabelle had tied. The ache was bearable. The quiet was not. Every crackle of wood reminded me of her voice, the warmth in it when she said my name. Every whisper of wind through sagebrush felt like her breath against my skin. I told myself I'd done the right thing by leaving. Men like me didn't belong in towns or in the gentle hearts of women who deserved still mornings instead of gunfire. But the lie felt heavier than the truth. By midnight, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Flint lifted his head, snorted once. I rose, hand on the revolver. The desert was too still. Then, faintly, from the ridge, a glint of light, not stars. Fire, Low Mesa. My heart dropped clean out of me. I mounted fast and rode hard, the night splitting around us. The wind stung my face, carried smoke that grew thicker with each mile. When I crested the final hill, the town burned like a sunrise made of hell. Flames climbed the saloon first, roof already collapsing, light spilling across the mud street. People ran, shouting, forming a line of buckets that meant nothing against fire that wild. The church bell tolled madly, rung by hands desperate to believe noise could stop destruction. I rode straight into it, calling her name. "Annabelle!" The sheriff staggered from the jailhouse, blood on his temple. "Cutter's men!" he coughed. "What's left of them. Came for you. Said if they couldn't kill the man, they'd kill his ghost." "Where is she?" He pointed toward the saloon. The fire flared, groaning. I didn't wait. I hit the ground running, the heat wrapping me whole. The doors hung half-burned, smoke curling like dark lace. Inside, the air was thick, choking. The piano melted into black ribs of iron. I shouted again, voice raw. Then I heard it, faint, through the crackle. "Colt!" I found her near the back, pinned beneath a fallen beam, one arm free, eyes wide and bright through the smoke. Her dress was torn, soot streaking her skin. She was alive, barely. I dropped to my knees, heaved at the beam. It shifted, not enough. I braced, pulled again, pain screaming through my shoulder. It gave. She crawled free, gasping, coughing. "Can you walk?" She nodded, breath ragged. I pulled her up, arm around her waist, and together we stumbled out into the burning street. Rain began to fall again, thin, bitter, too late. We collapsed against the well, air burning in our lungs. She turned her face to me, eyes wet from more than smoke. "You came back." "I never really left," I said. The sheriff and two others dragged water barrels closer, dousing what they could. Most of the town was still standing. The saloon was gone. Annabelle watched the flames with an expression I couldn't read. Not grief, not relief. Something quieter, like an ending she'd expected all along. "It's over," I said. She shook her head. "Not yet. Cutter had a brother. I heard the men shouting it. Tate Cutter. He runs the mining camp north of here. He'll come looking for you now." I stared into the fire. "Then it never ends." "Maybe it's not meant to," she whispered. "Maybe some stories only rest when we do." The rain thickened, beating the fire down. Steam rose around us, ghostly and soft. She leaned against me, trembling, then went still. Her heartbeat slowed against my chest. "You're safe now," I said. Her eyes lifted to mine. "No. We're both just breathing in the pause before the next storm." She was right. I could feel it, the way the desert always waits for the next fight, the next loss, the next chance at mercy. I held her anyway, because in that moment, holding her felt like the only way to quiet the noise of the world. When the last flame sank to ember, the sheriff came over, hat in hand. "Town'll rebuild," he said, "but I can't say if the peace will hold." "Peace doesn't hold," I said. "It's something you rebuild every sunrise." He nodded, eyes on Annabelle. "You both should rest. Tomorrow's gonna come too soon." We stayed there a while longer, the rain cooling the ground, the smell of ash fading into wet earth. Her hand found mine in the dark. Fingers laced, gentle, deliberate. "Where will you go now?" she asked. "Maybe nowhere," I said. "Maybe here." She smiled, faint but real. "Then maybe the desert will finally learn what home sounds like." I didn't answer. And I didn't have to. The fire had taken her saloon, but not her spirit. And maybe that was enough. 2 souls left standing in the wreckage, breathing, daring to hope again. If this part has lit a quiet ember in your chest, keep it close. The ashes still glow, and love, like the desert, never truly sleeps. Morning found the town wrapped in smoke and silence. Low Mesa looked smaller now, humbled. The saloon stood as a blackened frame of ribs, timbers smouldering where laughter used to live. The street was empty, except for the tired and the living. Annabelle stood barefoot on the boardwalk, her dress grey with ash, hair loose, eyes hollow, but burning with a strange calm. The rain had stopped some time before dawn, leaving everything shining wet, even the ruins. I walked toward her, slow. The wound in my shoulder throbbed in rhythm with each step. She looked at me without speaking, the way people look at someone they've seen too much of in too short a time. "Sheriff says we'll rebuild," she said finally. "Will you?" She nodded once, gaze drifting to the wreckage. "I built this place once before. I can do it again. But I won't do it alone this time." There was weight in those words, not plea, but promise. The sheriff came up behind me, hat in hand. His voice was rough. "Cutter's men scattered north after the fire. Word is, Tate Cutter's already on the move." "How many?" I asked. 6, maybe 7. He's worse than his brother. Meaner without the charm." Annabelle's jaw tightened. "Then we finish it. Here." "No," I said. "Not here. The town's had enough blood." The sheriff looked between us. "You mean to take this fight to them?" I met his eyes. "I mean to end it where it started." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I'll give you a day's ride head start. After that, Low Mesa's its own again." Annabelle didn't argue. She just walked inside the half-standing saloon and came back with a saddlebag. "Then you're not riding alone?" "I can't ask that of you." "You're not," she said. Her voice left no room for debate. The sheriff muttered something about fools and destiny, then walked away. We saddled our horses and left before noon, heading north. The land opened wide again, the desert stretching endless, the sky pale as bone. Every mile away from town felt like a memory peeling off behind us. By evening, the horizon turned red. We stopped near an old windmill that moaned with each turn. The light faded slow, the kind of dusk that makes a man remember everything he tried to forget. Annabelle broke the silence first. "Do you ever think about before?" "Before what?" "Before the killing. Before the running." I took a long breath. "Sometimes. It comes back in smells. Rain on cedar, bread baking, a woman laughing somewhere she thought no one could hear." She smiled faintly. "Sounds like a good place to have come from." "It was," I said. "Until it wasn't." We sat close to the fire, the quiet between us softer now. She pulled the lamp from her saddlebag, the same one she'd given me that first night, and lit it. The flame steadied, gold and patient. "Why'd you keep it?" I asked. "Because it found you in the dark once," she said. "Maybe it can do it again." The wind shifted. I caught the faint smell of tobacco and sweat. Riders nearby. I stood, scanning the ridge. Shadows moved against the dying light. "Tate," I said. He rode in slow, 6 men behind him, the kind who'd never learned to look behind them because they'd never had to. He looked nothing like Sloane. Leaner, younger, eyes colder. The kind of man who smiled at graves. He stopped 20 feet away, raincoat flapping in the wind. "You Mercer?" "I am." "Then you killed my brother." "I ended a man who was already killing himself," I said. He laughed, dry and low. "That sounds like preacher talk. You think words make it cleaner?" "No," I said. "But they keep me human." His eyes shifted to Annabelle. "She yours?" "She's not anyone's," I said. He smiled wider. "That's a shame. Women like her shouldn't watch what's about to happen." Before I could move, he drew and fired. The bullet tore through my coat, grazing ribs. I dropped to one knee, the wind screaming between us. Annabelle dove for cover, pulling her small revolver from her bag. The world turned to thunder again. Gunfire, shouting, horses screaming. I fired back, caught one of his men clean. Another fell from the saddle. The air stank of smoke and iron. Annabelle's shot cracked sharp and sure. The man climbing the ridge didn't reach the top. She reloaded, calm as sunrise, eyes blazing through the smoke. Tate circled wide, firing blind, using his men as shield. I moved low, using the rocks for cover. The lamp's glow flickered near Annabelle's feet. Its small flame held, steady through chaos. One by one, the gunfire slowed. Then it was only Tate and me. He stood 10 paces away, face smeared with blood and rain, breath ragged. "You think killing me makes you clean?" he shouted. "No," I said, "but it'll make the night quieter." He lifted his gun. Mine was already up. The 2 shots came so close they sounded like one. His body jerked, stumbled, fell. My side burned where the slug had found me, but I stayed standing. The silence afterward was vast, the kind that hums inside your bones. Annabelle ran to me, dropped the gun, caught me before I fell. Her hands pressed against my chest. "Colt." "I'm fine," I lied. Her eyes filled with something between fury and grief. "Don't you dare die on me." "I'm not," I whispered. "Not tonight." We sank to the ground together, the lamp's glow between us. Its light painted her face gold and trembling. The desert wind swept through, carrying away the last smoke of violence. She pressed her forehead to mine. "If this is the last night," she said, "then let it mean something. It already does." The moon climbed slow over the ridge. The lamp's flame swayed, but never went out. If this story has burned in rhythm with your heart, stay close. The night still holds one more breath, and the dawn has something left to heal. Dawn broke slow over the ridge, soft and trembling. The desert wore its quiet like a prayer, answered too late. The fire had died to embers. The lamp still burned faint beside us, a single golden heartbeat against the pale. Annabelle stirred first. She sat wrapped in her shawl, eyes tracing the horizon as if waiting for something she didn't want to arrive. My side ached deep, but the bleeding had stopped. The air was cool, gentle. Even the wind seemed tired of carrying sorrow. Tate Cutter and his men lay scattered behind the rocks, their guns cold, their vengeance spent. The ground around them steamed where the sun touched it. I pushed myself upright, leaning on Flint's saddle. Annabelle turned, helped without speaking. Her hands were steady, her breath soft. For a moment, it felt like the world had paused, not in peace, but in understanding. "You should rest," she said. "I will," I told her, though I knew I wouldn't. She watched me with those eyes that saw through everything. "You've carried this weight long enough, Colt. Whatever debt you think you owe the world, it's paid." "Maybe," I said. "But the road's been my only home. Hard to stop walking just because the dust got quiet." She smiled then, small, sad, and brighter than the sunrise. "Maybe it's time to let something else carry you." We buried the dead together when the sun rose high enough to burn the chill away. No words, no markers, just stones laid neat and kind. Annabelle whispered something under her breath when she placed the last one, something that sounded like forgiveness. When it was done, we rode south. The sky spread wide, endless blue stitched with silver clouds. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. Low Mesa appeared in the distance, smaller than memory. Smoke from rebuilding fires curled up from its heart. Life, stubborn and unafraid, had already started again. We stopped on a rise overlooking the town. I felt the pull of it, a place trying to mend itself, like a scar that learns to wear the pain with grace. Annabelle's hair lifted in the wind. "You could stay," she said, quiet as a confession. I looked at her then, the woman who had stood in fire and storm and still found room for mercy. "If I did," I said, "it'd be because you asked me to." "I'm asking," she said. The words hung there, trembling like a flame. The wind caught the edge of my coat, tugged as if the world wanted its answer too. I looked toward the desert, the endless road, the hills fading to gold, and then back to her. "I've spent half my life chasing silence," I said. "Maybe it's time I learned what peace sounds like." Her eyes softened. "It sounds like home." I dismounted, dropped the reins. Flint snorted once and started grazing. She stepped closer, the space between us filled with warmth, the kind that doesn't burn but stays. When she touched my face, her hand trembled, but her voice didn't. "You don't have to run anymore." "I know," I whispered. She leaned in, and the kiss came like dawn itself, slow, sure, washing everything clean. The desert stretched around us, golden and endless, the kind of quiet that isn't empty but full of promise. When we finally parted, I rested my forehead against hers. "I never believed in second chances," I said. She smiled. "Then believe in this one." We stood there until the sun climbed high, the light catching the lamp still tied to my saddle. Its flame flickered once in the wind, then went out, not from weakness, but because it didn't need to burn anymore. Behind us, the town of Low Mesa breathed new life. Before us, the horizon waited, wide, forgiving, and full of miles. Maybe we'd ride again someday. Maybe we'd stay. Either way, the storm had passed, and the hearts it left behind had found their own kind of peace. If this story has touched a tender place in your heart, let your light stay with us. Comment, share, and subscribe so this Western fire keeps burning for you.